Welcome to Peloton's Move for Life podcast. In this podcast, we peel back the layers of our in-class programming and we talk about the science behind fitness. In each episode, you're going to get direct takeaways from wellness experts in the health and wellness space.
Like for every 1 minute of vigorous exercise, that can add about 5 minutes of life expectancy.
Wow, that's such a crazy stat,
It
right?
really is.
It's hard to do strength training and or running or anything if you can't actually get into the movement because you have a lack of mobility.
You can even injure yourself without kind of the proper strength training plus stretching. Little statistic, every hour of walking adds about 3 hours of life expectancy. When you knock out 1 hour of walking, and again, we can do it over time, think about that adding 3 hours to your life expectancy.
We're going to learn more about living longer, healthier, and happier lives together. Matt Wilpers here, and welcome to Peloton's podcast, Move for Life. As a Peloton instructor, I could not be more excited about our chat today. We're going to be talking about exercise and its impact on longevity. So you're not just living longer, but adding life to your years. And before we get started, I want to welcome our special guest. She's a physician, medical contributor for NBC News, health advisor at Peloton, and of course, my good friend, Dr. Kavita Patel.
It's great to be with you, Matt. We're going to geek out on some exercise numbers today.
I love this. So this is what I talk about most at Peloton as an instructor, exercise. How does exercise play a role in longevity?
So exercise is incredibly important for longevity. We've talked about factors around longevity. It's not the only factor, but exercise and kind of specifically how you exercise. I think that sometimes people just think of exercise as one thing or another. And what we've learned through the science is that it's a little bit of everything, but you got to start with something that actually matters.
I love that. And it speaks to my time pre-Peloton when I thought I was going to go to med school. And I was going through the shadowing a physician, and the physician would say to the patient, you need to exercise. And then they ask, well, what does that mean? And
right. What do I do?
And the doctor would go, well, talk to Matt.
That's right. Matt will help you here. And I think that just shows you, like, I remember in medical school, I didn't get much of a curriculum in exercise or nutrition. So a lot of this that we're talking about today is science, because that we didn't have that kind of education even several decades ago. But because of people like you, we've accumulated so much knowledge and have now linked it to mortality and to life expectancy. And that's why we're talking about it in the context of longevity.
Now, what exercise routine do you recommend to live longer and healthier?
Yeah, so I think the best routine is one where you can actually have a combination of cardio, strength training, mobility. And then we talked a little bit in another pod about connection and purpose. So mindfulness. And what's amazing about Peloton, which is why it appeals to me, it's got a little bit of everything. And just when you think, oh, I'm a great runner like you, Matt, but if you don't pay attention to those other pieces, flexibility, balance, mobility, mindfulness, being kind of different with how you do your exercise, whether that means indoor, outdoor, type of cardio, all of that can matter. But it can also be intimidating. So I think today we should hopefully just break it down where it kind of feels like you walk away with some simple tools and tips to get you started or to enhance your current workout.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot, but when you put it together, it's actually very manageable. And what I love about too is that when you find that balance, or at least when I found that balance,
you know it.
You know it.
You do.
It feels so good. And you're like, each part of this has a purpose.
Yeah.
And once you go through it, you're like, oh, I understand. And you start to realize when you're out of balance.
And it's great for an athlete of every type, whether you're just starting and you wouldn't consider yourself an athlete yet, or you're somebody like you, Matt, who has been consistent and also is trying to enhance their workout. We know, and we'll get into the science, that you can enhance your intensity, and that too can help with different aspects of your health.
First thing that comes to mind is strength training. Lots of people are talking about strength training right now, but it's not, you still have to have cardio.
You do.
But let's take a moment to talk about strength training.
Yeah. So let's talk about what we know around strength training. I think the most common question that I get, in addition to like, what kind of exercise do I need to do? It's how long do I need to strength train? And then do I need to do it all in one burst? And so when we scan the literature to understand the benefits of strength training, what we find is that it's really about 60 minutes of strength training each week. And you can break that down into, let's say, 2 30-minute segments. Or if you're like me and you have 10 minutes here, but it's doing strength that's really kind of appropriately form is important. You don't want to hurt yourself. And then two, you really have to think about the timing. So that means taking breaks between reps. That means taking breaks between sets, not too long, not too short. So what I like to tell people is don't try to just lift a set of weights without that kind of supervision, like in the form of an instructor doing this with you, or in like following the cues that many of the instructors on Peloton give to make sure that you don't injure yourself. But then also the time. Do the time that breaks down for you, but make sure that any minute you're donating to like strength training, that you're thinking about leveling up each time. So
Absolutely.
I tell people to journal it. That's why Peloton, I think we've encouraged people to even just like write down what they notice about their strength training routine. And just to get back to the numbers, again, that 60 minutes of strength training each week can improve not just your life expectancy, but it can also decrease your chances of mortality from things like, for example, cancer, cardiovascular disease, or even all
Yeah.
causes of mortality. So strength matters.
Absolutely. And I love that you further define the amount of time.
Yeah.
Because when we look at CDC guidelines, American Heart Association guidelines, they give the generic 2 times a week,
Right. But no
but no
definition.
color on time.
Right.
And so that, to me, should I be pegging that 60 minutes to the time?
Yeah, and I think that that's just a goal. And again,
Okay.
these are studies that looked what keep in mind what studies try to do. Studies really try to look for that kind of optimal amount of, in this case, strength training to relate to the greatest potential in reducing your mortality or increasing your life expectancy. And what I like to tell people is that doesn't mean it's just that one fixed point. That doesn't mean that just doing 20 minutes doesn't help you.
Yeah.
It just helps give you a goal, just like we talked about with like the American Heart Association and 150 minutes of kind of activity a week. You can break that up, but starting somewhere helps to build to that goal. So when I started strength training, I wanted to build to those 2 30 minutes, but I started with 5 to 10 minutes here and there. This gets back to your point about rest and recovery too.
One thing I often talk about in classes is making sure your mind is a part of the party as well.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
strength training, in cardio, oftentimes we get on the bike, we go for a run, and we kind of space out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm constantly encouraging people to not do that, to
Right.
really think about your movement patterns. In strength training, your mind needs to be on just as much as your body.
Yeah. And then when we talk about the different studies, like when
Yeah.
people add in strength training, it reduces cardiovascular risk of death or cancer risk of death. It was when people had really guided, mindful kind of strength training.
Huh.
In these cases, because there's studies, often it was under supervision, but you get the point. It's what you just said, that you can't use it to kind of zone out, so to speak, not to use the zone in a different way, but just you don't want to kind of tune out to what you're doing. And remember, your mind is the most powerful muscle.
Yes.
So I think that strength training, to your point, starts with, even if you're not feeling it that day, having your mind be ready. I am working, I'm doing, and I'm getting stronger just by being present. And I think that's incredible. I do remind people that the brain is the biggest muscle, right up there,
100%.
right next to your heart, but probably the brain is where I'd start with the workout.
Yeah, when we talk about the benefits of strength training, we often think about, when it comes to longevity, thinking about reducing the potential for falls, et cetera, especially as you get older. As a runner, I call it bulletproofing your body.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yes.
so if you can strength train to get stronger bones and tendons, you can then layer upon more training load to your body without having with reduced risk of injury.
It's really interesting you talk about like the running load and again, we'll kind of get into like walking versus running.
Yeah.
And I'd love to learn from you kind of when you know that you're at this point where the running needs to be what you kind of work with versus walking. I think a lot of people want to know that. But I do think that each unit, and by the way, just to get back to like longevity, we know that like for every 1 minute of vigorous exercise, and just you talking about running made me think of this, that can add about 5 minutes of life expectancy.
Wow,
So
that's such a crazy stat,
it
right?
really is. It's like 1 minute, and you've talked about it, we've talked about it, but it
Yeah.
just reminds me one more thing about how exercise plays a role in longevity. If I think about starting from wherever I'm at and doing that 1 minute, and that adds 5 minutes, that's 5 more minutes with your son, that's 5 more minutes with my family, that's 5 minutes that I'm living that I contributed to. So I want people to really kind of break it down. Again, an athlete of any type can
Yeah.
benefit from that kind of exercise. And if it's vigorous, it really does add up in the years you save and add to your life.
Wow. One other thing I think about when I think strength training that I was, as I studied this stuff in school a little bit was metabolic tissue.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Is active tissue
Yeah,
versus
tell-
like
right.
non-active tissue. And
Right.
strength training increases your body comp of metabolic active tissue.
And tell us, Matt, just because the body comp is so important. I get a
Yes.
lot of people where, in fact, the science around how we talk about body composition is really coming into its own.
I
And I
love
think
that.
I think you're referencing so often people like don't understand kind of our body has a lot of water, it has a lot of fat, a lot of muscle. All of that is natural. And I think, can you tell me what you mean by active kind of composition?
So metabolic active competition or composition is basically muscle burns calories just
Right.
existing.
Pure.
Just
Right. And it's more efficient, right?
it's more efficient.
Right.
And so basically you're able to not only have something that's actually helping you produce movement, but it's also your caloric burn is going to be higher.
Right. And we can actually measure this. This is something we've been doing in patients. There are different ways to measure kind of that level of like how much muscle you have. But this all ties back to our topic of exercise because it's why strength training is important.
Yeah.
And I think that unfortunately, like when I was growing up, there was this notion that like women shouldn't strength train because we shouldn't quote unquote look too quote masculine or too muscular. And now we know science is showing us that women, it doesn't even matter how you identify, strength matters, but it matters for what you talk about. It matters for being efficient with what you're doing, with what you put in your body. But we also know that that same metabolism helps us when we get diseases. If we get sick with a virus, or if I get something as serious as cancer, my body's ability to exercise helps. So I'm going to tell you about a breakthrough study last year that came out that just blew all of us in adult medicine away. We found that patients who are undergoing chemotherapy, people who are actively getting treated for cancer, when they put in a resistance or strength training regimen, that they actually had less side effects from their chemo.
Wow.
And that they found overall improved function.
Huh.
And so these are patients
Wow.
getting probably the most intense medicine. We're talking about medicine that blasts your body, kills your immune response on purpose to fight cancer.
Yeah.
And all
Wow.
we did was add in a layer of exercise. And we saw a reduction in the symptoms that people have from those cancer treatments and an improvement overall from their recovery. I don't know what
That's
better
wild.
it is. So it just gets you made me think of it when you were talking about just like the active or kind of the metabolic function in your body. And again, it gets back to like it's never too late. Who would think that you would take a patient who had not really concentrated on strength training or resistance and said to them, "Hey, while we're treating your cancer, let's do this." But they did.
I love
And it
it.
actually had demonstrable, proven, and repeated results. So
Wow.
never too late. And also never too kind of wrong of a time to put it into your regimen.
No, it can also prepare you for other things too.
And that's it. That's why you made me think of it like, think of it as just like you would do oil maintenance on your car,
Yeah.
gas maintenance, all of that. You're just doing things so that your body is ready for anything life hands you.
There's a big craze about walking right now.
Yes.
Can we talk about what are the benefits of walking?
So this is, I think, some of the most important kind of
New Yorkers, I mean, we're
Yeah,
crushing
and
it.
you've heard there's been a lot on social media, like around just like how much walking, how much to do, and kind of the benefits of walking. And so what we know from the science is that walking can have an impact on not just life expectancy. What we've seen is it's usually longer durations of
Yes.
walking. So
Makes sense.
on average, we're talking about people who are walking maybe even up to 3 hours, and
Whoa.
that's a day. But let me say that that was just some of the studies to show that you don't have to have a high intensity workout in order to see the benefits.
Yes.
However, I think to just dial it back to kind of a reality, you'll often hear people talking about 30 minutes of walking. And that's also a study that we've seen where 30 minutes of walking several times a week, not only does it get us to our 150 number, but that can be enough of an intensity, if you will, to help your body burn calories and to also kind of create that kind of muscle memory of doing something at a repeated fashion. So how does that relate to your actual health? We found that when diabetics engage in a regular walking routine, we've seen improvements in their sugar, period, not changing anything else, that just that alone. And on average, those are people who are walking anywhere from 20 to 60 minutes a day. So it can be a longer interval. But if you told me 10 years ago that you could change your diabetes with just walking, I wouldn't have believed you until I saw some of the repeated evidence, not just one study, several studies. Another study looked at people in their, after the age of 50, starting to walk, and just whether or not that could have an effect on any longer term falls, their muscle memory in terms of how like they remember the walking. Can you get back into it? If you had a fall and your recovery, it improves all aspects. So in that case, this was also kind of, again, a higher quantity of walking. People were walking for several hours a week. So in this case, I would say just get out the door and start something. Do it in a consistent pattern, and don't stress too much about the intensity in this case. I think that we know that there are health benefits of walking alone. And I'd be curious to ask you, when you and I did our walk, I was joking like, Matt, don't walk so fast. I can't keep up with you. Do you see any differences in over time? I would imagine, like me, you can improve your walking pace. And don't stress about it in the beginning. But if you just keep it consistent, you will notice that you actually find yourself walking at a higher pace just by doing the same thing over and over. Is that something that you find?
Oh, 1,000%. And two things come to mind. The first is at Peloton, we launched walking pace targets.
Oh, that's right.
And it was a project I worked on.
Yeah.
And it was something I was like, as part of creating it.
Right.
And you start to realize like, oh, wow, like your walking can improve.
Yeah.
And you can walk faster, and you start to quantify and give yourself objective targets to hit for pacing for walking.
Right.
Totally changes walking.
Yeah.
Totally changed. Pace targets for walking totally changed walking for me.
And that's a great reminder, because I didn't even realize that you could pace it. I always felt like it was a running thing and didn't apply to walking.
Well, again, it was something we've talked about in the past, that all or nothing thinking. I was like, you're either walking or you're not.
Right.
And it turns out there's a lot of different things we could do with walking. And the other thing about walking that I've noticed is I come from Georgia. And
that's right.
Yeah, I come a Georgia boy. So when I go back home, when I'm with my parents, it's the amount of walking that you can do where we live in, or they live in Georgia, is much, much less than New York.
Yeah.
So I go back and I just don't feel as good.
Yeah.
And then I come back here and I'm like, it is clearly the amount of walking that we're doing here in New York that there's a difference between me just like and how I feel day to day.
So that's a good example. If you find yourself in an area where you just don't have the environment and you might not even have the time, you can do this indoors. I actually have tried this where I've done it inside of like hospitals and office buildings, and you'll pick up like 10,000 steps. By the way, that's a lot of people say, how many steps a day? And I said, don't concentrate too much on the steps. Think about kind of the duration for you. And then also think about this over time. I think too much attention has kind of come on a certain number every single day. That can help you sometimes with a goal, but it can also feel like you're not doing enough. And so I do tell people, like, start, and you can start with a time amount, or just, I'm going to get to, like, if you're on a trail, get to the end of something and set that goal. But don't get so caught up in defeatism if you don't get to a certain number. But the science does show us that, again, around a couple hours a day can give you some of the most optimal results. but even a smaller amount, 10 to 20 to 30 minutes a day, can enhance your life expectancy.
This is walking, which
Walking.
is, I mean,
Get
something
out
that
and
we
walk.
think so simple. So something that goes along with walking is VO2 Max.
Oh,
One of
our
my favorite words.
Oh, Matt, this is all
Or
you.
words, I should say.
You've always been talking about VO2 Max. Yes.
Yes. And, I like to talk about it in class, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, break it down.
Can you break it down?
Yeah. So let's just say the V reminder for people, V refers to volume, O2, oxygen. And this is really about how your body and your lungs, but not just your lungs, but how your entire body is kind of handling oxygen, which we breathe in, and it gives us all that metabolic goodness and switching over and making energy. And then we breathe out carbon dioxide. So there are different kind of ways to measure this. I'm going to say that one of the best and most kind of accurate ways to measure it is you've probably seen people that are on a bike with the mask that looks like some sort of gas mask on them, and they're hooked up to tubes.
Give me PTSD, man.
You've done it. So I've done it on others.
I've done it so many different ways.
Done it on myself. It's a great baseline to understand how your body, that's measuring the oxygen you're breathing in and how you're using it and how efficient you are and how much you're breathing out in terms of the form of carbon dioxide. Absolutely. And what it does is it gives us this relative efficiency on not just how your body is handling oxygen and processing it, but I'll give you an example of where it ties to health, that for every unit of an increase of your VO2 max, we have an additional 45 days that it kind of adds to your life. And so I can
believe that.
This is like and I will also say this, because of what I just described to you, it's not like you can just run to the corner pharmacy and get your VO2 max checked, but I like to kind of use it in a couple of situations. I like to use it in patients who are really just trying to understand more about how they can either start an exercise routine, or for athletes who have been exercising for a long time and they're trying to understand what parts of their routine can they enhance to achieve just more efficient workouts. Yeah. And we know that if people have kind of a higher VO2 max, meaning their body takes in oxygen, processes it more efficiently, and then breathes it out at a certain amount, that the higher that is, the longer they live. That's just a fact. Wow. And so, but again, for the regular person, a way I start to think about an easier way to do a VO2 max is, again, you and I have spoken about recovery, kind of workout. How long does it take for me to kind of feel like I'm like all out and I couldn't do more? Yeah. And then how long does it take for me to recover from that? And you really want to look at efficiency, meaning you can get to that all out kind of, max a little faster and recover a little faster is it's a little bit of doing a VO2 max in your pocket, not necessarily as scientific as what we do in a lab setting, but I think that it's becoming a much more important marker of longevity for why I mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every unit you increase can actually translate to 45 more days of life. And that's like a very good correlation for people to be able to kind of achieve as a goal.
It makes a lot of sense. And when I think VO2 max, like what you're talking about with this test you can do for yourself. In fitness, we call it a field test.
That's what I was going to ask you. So how do you describe it to people? Like a little back pocket
we call it field testing, because there's lab testing and then there's field testing. Yeah. And we can do so there's different markers that we talk about in fitness, including lactic threshold. And you can do tests to figure out, for example, in cycling, what is your power at lactic threshold? What is your power at VO2 max? Right. And with this, we can figure out what's called your phenotype. Right. Like, what kind of athlete are you? What are you either genetically predispositioned for? Right. And or like, how have you been trained to this point? And then you start to think about, in the cycling world, well, what are you training for? Right. What kind of fitness markers are most important for what you're training for? Right. And then training your fitness markers to meet that.
And do you recommend doing this kind of, especially if, doesn't matter where you are in your journey, do you do it at different intervals, kind of like the fitness tests that you do in the power zone training, where you recommend not getting obsessed and measuring it in a short time period, but maybe every so often, months, years?
Well, this is exciting. I think this is always exciting as a coach, is there's a performance curve, like a performance improvement curve. And the curve starts out really, really steep. So just think, you're a beginner, you're at the base of that curve, your improvement is very, very steep.
It's going to be dramatic.
But then once you're like a pretty elite athlete, you're starting to like playing out and you're working really, really hard for just tiny
Little.
improvements.
Mm-hmm.
So I always say for my beginners out there for just
Yeah.
getting started, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous
Yeah,
because
that's me.
you could be training, if you train consistently for like a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks,
You'll
6
see
weeks,
dramatic
you're
difference.
gonna see dramatic
And
improvements.
that's exactly what I saw. Yes. And then you'll plateau. But even with a plateau, this is where tools like VO2 Max, heart rate variability, some of the things we talk about for objective measures can help you, even if you feel like you're plateauing, to have some goals to set.
Absolutely. And when we think about VO2 Max, I just want to, the way I dive down this, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, is like, again, we're thinking about how much oxygen we're actually creating or being able to take, or sorry, we're thinking about how much oxygen we're able to take out of per breath.
Right.
That oxygen is then used to create energy.
That's right.
So if you bump your VO2 max, you're able to get more oxygen out of the air and actually convert energy, which means your heart rate isn't as high at the same intensity because you're getting more out of per breath.
Right.
Which means the stress to run your body at a given intensity is automatically less simply because you bumped your VO2.
I think that's very helpful and a reminder that you can see that even with walking.
Yeah.
So that this isn't, I have images of people having to be kind of, a certain number of like miles per hour in order to do this, but you can measure all of these things, the heart rate, kind of your VO2 max, or at least have a sense of your breathlessness. All of that can exist.
Absolutely.
Even with doing something like walking, whether it's walking flat or walking at an incline, which I know has been also very popular, people talking about kind of a high incline. All of that is just giving you a better sense of where you are on this kind of VO2 max, heart rate variability, and what you need. And it's very individual.
Very cool. Well, speaking of that, let's talk about the top 5. It is time for the top 5.
The top 5.
Let's
All
do
right.
it.
So let's do it. Matt, what are the top 5 Peloton classes to add for a longevity routine?
Well, first, strength training. Obviously, we have lots of different strength training classes out there and lots of different durations. Start off short, 10, 15 minutes. You can work your way up. I think, what is it, 60 minutes, is it?
Yeah, I think they've got 60.
I'm sure Adrian's got something crazy.
I'm sure
long.
he does. Yeah.
Okay. Next one is mobility and stretching. Super important. It's hard to do strength training and or running or anything if you can't actually get into the movement because you have a lack of mobility.
You can even injure yourself
Yeah.
without kind of the proper strength training plus stretching. So I find that actually is just as important as kind of measuring and thinking about your strength.
I always say that power is applied. Power can be created through range of motion or forced through range of motion. And if you lose range of motion, you lose the ability to create the power.
And it's true. What I've seen in patients too is that sometimes they'll be frustrated because they feel like they can't achieve a certain goal if they're training for something or trying to do a race. And I actually said, well, what are you doing for mobility or just stretching? And many times they'll say, well, I'm not doing as much or I'm not doing it as regularly. And I said, try putting that in and see if it actually gives you a better workout. And 99.99% of the time it does. So it's critical.
I've been preaching this all over the place, but still on mobility and stretching. Biggest pain reliever in my life. Like I have lots of aches and pains from over the years.
Stretching.
And if I better than any pill, better than anything I could take is if I just stretch and do some mobility work, I feel so much better.
And this is where getting some of it with supervision. So this is why the classes and kind of what we have for Peloton, they do it in a way where it's guided so that you don't hurt yourself. Because you can if you really overdo the stretch or the mobility in a wrong way. And for some people that might have certain conditions, back pain, et cetera, you do need to modify. So remember, everything we talk about might need to be modified for your specific situation.
Absolutely. Number 3, our walks.
Yes.
The endurance walks in our Move for Life program, which I'm a huge fan of.
That's right.
Power walking and hiking classes, of course, if you want to level up the intensity. So the walking class, they're very, very popular.
Little statistic, every hour of walking adds about 3 hours of life expectancy. Wow. So we've talked about the 1 minute of vigorous activity and 5 minutes of life expectancy. When you knock out 1 hour of walking, and again, we can do it over time. Think about that adding 3 hours to your life expectancy.
And you could just be doing one of Maddie's walk and talks.
Totally.
Man. Just listen to all the latest tea.
That's what I do. And it goes by like that. Or do one of ours. Yes.
Okay. Number 4, HIIT cardio. Bike, tread, and row. Of course, we have HIIT cardio for some, I always say when you're thinking about impact of training, You have time or you have intensity. You have to have if you want intensity, if you want to reduce the amount of time you exercise and you still want impact, intensity's got to go up. But you can only do that once you have a good base of training underneath your belt. So you have the strong muscles and bones to support the intensity.
Right.
But HIIT cardio, fantastic.
And intensity can, in those situations, once you've got your base and you do more kind of vigorous, we do know that with science that the intensity of that workout also translates to an improvement in all-cause mortality. We'll say the same things a lot because it's cardiovascular mortality. The reason people die, heart disease and other cancer and other illnesses, vigorous activity, once you've gotten your foundation and having that intensity added in can help.
Absolutely.
And there's studies that show different amounts of that intensity that you need per week, but we just want to recommend adding that in for diversity of your exercise once you felt comfortable kind of starting that routine.
Absolutely. And for all my endurance athletes out there, I often talk about, well, we have frequency, we have duration, and then we have intensity. And once you've kind of capped out or tapped out on how often you're working out, how long you're working out for, intensity then becomes your
Right.
gateway drug to your next, or at least your gateway to the next level of performance.
Right. There's always a way to level up, so to speak, and it can have direct health consequences.
Absolutely. Okay, number 5, low impact cardio options. I love this one.
Yes, there's lots of them.
It's we just launched, it's called Boost Your Base Cycling Program. And it's crazy. It's all endurance classes. And the feedback I've gotten from this program, people are like, I've improved all this much. I'm like, it wasn't very little intensity, just consistent training.
That's it.
Did tremendous for lots of people.
Yeah. And that there's so many different forms of exercise that are not only available in Peloton, but it just teaches you what you can do even when you're away and you're doing something like form and function, and how easy it is to incorporate cardio in a different way. There's so many things that you can do with very little to no equipment and get something done.
Love that. Now, speaking of getting something done, you recently went on your own health journey.
The reason I kind of got into the science behind this is because I felt like at one point in time, Matt, I would do all kinds of classes. I kind of overthought the classes and wanted to make sure I had 30 to 60 minutes here because we've talked about the American Heart Association 150 a week and the goals. But what I realized was I was overthinking it, and I wanted to go back to the basics because I had been researching this science for what we are doing. And I was like, why am I overthinking this? Why not just go to 2 to 3 for me, 2 to 3 strength training sessions a week to get that 60 minutes, and then to put in like any amount of like what you would call kind of zone 2 training, which, another episode, we can kind of do an entire episode on what is zone 2 training, but not to overthink it and to just do it consistently. And it was an incredible transformation, not just for my own health, back to the active and metabolic numbers, but it was really a lesson in practicing what we're preaching. So if I can do it at my age after not having started as an athlete, and I did this with years of having started on Peloton and the bike, tread, now with the row, with with the weights. But what was easy for me to finally figure out is what you said. It was a pattern, consistency, and then forgiving myself. There were weeks even where I was traveling. I would do things where I couldn't get in, but I was able to kind of sneak in, like kind of getting back into a pattern, walking and pacing the halls of a hospital, or doing something that recreated that feeling that you described in Georgia. I did exactly that. And then the days I couldn't, I was very forgiving, but I also said, this is just a day I'm not going to be able to do it. And I start tomorrow and I do it. I get it done then. And I think for me personally, as a mom of 2 with no time, I had no time in my mind and to change the way I worked out and brought health into my life. But I did, and it was consistency. So consistency is key. And don't overthink it. That was probably the 2 lessons I learned personally. And I'm still doing it. So it's not ending. There's no end date with what I told you about life expectancy and longevity and health span. There's no end date to it. It's just going to be the way I live. It's just life. And that I think has changed everything.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of one thing I love to say is I read this somewhere. It's not my quote, but I'll take it anyways, is that consistency trumps intensity
It does.
any day of the week.
It does.
Because oftentimes we get stuck in this habit of thinking, I need to have this stellar workout
Right.
to get what I want, to get that fitness result.
Right.
And the result of having that stellar workout is maybe you're sore tomorrow.
Right.
Maybe you miss that next workout. Missing that next workout is more costly. It's like it outweighs the benefits of that stellar workout.
People have asked, like, what are you doing differently? And I'm like, I'm just doing it every day. I'm just walking. I'm just getting on or off the bike. I'm not overthinking the intensity. And I'm trying to make sure that every single day counts. That's the change, along with sleep and diet. I'm not great on sleep, but all of these things together give you a longer life expectancy. And I'm proud to say that you can do it at any age because I'm living proof of it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Peloton family, that tells you right there that every minute of movement is an investment in your future, right?
That's
no matter
right.
if you're doing a VO2 Max Power Zone ride,
Right.
HIIT ride, or simply doing one of our endurance walks in our Move for Life program.
That's right. And take note of what works. Just make a little note that, like, if you find that walking is your thing, keep doing that. And then we can figure out how to level up when and if the time is appropriate. But even that will make a difference.
I always try to think about gearing my training for what I feel like I want. Like, what do I want in that moment? Like to make sure that you're excited as possible to be there. Not every day is going to feel like, hey, like I'm excited to be here. Some days you got to just get through it.
Yeah.
But if you can increase the ratio of days you're excited about your training, even just a little bit.
That's right.
Wow, does that make a difference? So think about what you do actually enjoy.
Yeah.
And try to bring enjoyment into your training.
And it's been fun when you can do it as a unit. So I've dragged my kids in with me.
Nice.
And it just makes for, honestly, like we're having more like family conversations. And my kids even are kind of seeing the benefit. And they're like, Mommy, you seem so much more relaxed. I said, yeah, I think that just doing this and doing it like on a daily basis is something I'm proud of. I'm proud to show them.
You're setting a great example.
I am. And if I can do it, I'm going to say this over and over. If I can do it, you can do it too. Because you and I talk about this. Like, I came to Peloton just wanting to get smarter, better, healthier, and happier. And then I had to learn what that meant for me. So everyone can find it in their own way.
Well, I love that. Good job.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So next episode, we're going to dive into nutrition and sleep, 2 more pillars of our longevity that work synergistically with exercise. I want to thank you, Dr. Patel, once again for being here, for sharing your knowledge with us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. That was fun.
And remember, you're not just training for today, you're training to move for life. Thank you.